Just behind me here is the Tumulus Er Grah, which has got basically a dolmen built in to the site. This is about 120 meters wide. It's a huge tumulus made of stone and earth, which is excavated at various times through the 18 and 1900s, and it's probably the Grand Menhir stood at the base of it, which could have been seen for miles around. So the Tumulus of Er Grah is an example of a large funerary monument, probably during the 5th millennium BC, and it was built actually before the Table Des Marchands, which is the main megalithic chamber here. Probably over 100 meters wide, 100 meters long in total. It goes all the way down to where the Grand Menhir stands. So the great stone probably stood at the entrance at the beginning of this particular kind of mound. There was no trace of a body, probably because of the acid soil, which is a real problem here, which is a pity because no doubt, I believe there's probably giant skeletons were found here. There are fragments of a ceramic dish, flint tools and jewellery were found in the tomb. Obviously a person of importance was actually buried in here. And it just suggests that this was a very, very important site, and this was probably built very close to the time of the Great Menhir. Unfortunately, you can't go in there or on it, but there's actually carvings on the underside of the stone there. And unfortunately, you can't go in there now, but there are photos of excavations where you can actually go inside the main dolmen. And this was indeed part of a great stone. So the top part, the tabletop part of the dolmen was actually part of a great menhir. So this is very, very interesting. We find the same kind of thing in Gavronis and also in the Table Des Marchands, where the stone itself is in fact part of a great menhir, which probably stood at this site, which is part of it's over at Gavronis, part of it's here. So this is one end of it, and this is sort of the layers and the great chamber that was inside it, and it continued all the way down to next to the Great Menhir, which we're going to go to next. You can see the major capstone here, which is on the entrance to the Table Des Marchands. And you can just see these wonderful stones along the side. You can see some carvings here, just on the left. Just on the right here, we have all these serpents and like grids carved on to this particular block. A certain type of granite that comes from a few miles away. And here we have other carvings that have been kind of chipped off and destroyed, with these great menhirs holding up the mighty capstone. Used to be one of the massive menhirs or standing stones here at the site. That's probably one of many, along with the Grand Menhir, which we'll see in a moment. But this is the sort of highlight, this stone here. This was at the back of the chamber, sort of like the top of a surfboard really, but this is the 53 crooks on it, and it's absolutely stunning. So just behind me, this is the main stone in the Table Des Marchands. Now this was actually uncovered in the 1800s, and actually a tramp used to live in here. We actually used that wood cutting on our 2009 or 2011 rather Megalithomania poster and flyer. But this shows 53 crooks, which could represent 52 weeks of the year plus one for some reason, with a solar symbol and all these megaliths around it. But the reconstruction isn't necessarily accurate. It's pretty close, but it's just like a classic example of like a passage grave. They found many beautiful pieces in here, which are on display partly in the Carnac Museum and others in different parts of France. And it dates back to later than the Grand Menhir and the other, the main stones that were here. But it's equally important, and it's been quite well preserved, so it's a treat to come here without many people, too many tourists here. here with Jim Vieira, and you can see here this is like this is part of one of the great stones that was discovered. It was one of the standing stones here, probably 10 meters tall, 30 plus feet tall, and they actually used part of it, a segment of it, to make the ceiling of this chamber. They used another part of it to make the ceiling at Gavronis, where we're going to have a look at tomorrow. And so this is amazing. So they're reusing the massive megaliths to create the ceilings of these megalithic chambers. Behind us here, you can see this great stone. This is the famous stone, and this has the 53 kind of shepherd's crooks on it with a solar symbol down the bottom. It's quite damaged. There's been carvings over the top of it, but this is just absolutely incredible. And along the side here, we have more carvings. If you look carefully, we'll have a look at these closely. Some of them have serpents on. I believe this one here possibly. And there's some carvings on this one. So all the way down here we have just an amazing selection of carvings. So you can see on the side stones here, we can see carvings all over the place. This could be a representation of some kind of crook, it could be the serpents. If we look over this side as we come in, so here there appears to be some kind of carvings on this one as well. So you can see the shepherd's crook just there on the ceiling. But here, we just continue upwards. There's like two crooks, one there, and there's a sort of axe type thing there. And here is the legs of the animal, which has been, you know, the rest of it's been broken off, so you can't see the rest of it, but that shows you like the back legs, I believe. And that was a 3D relief carving of some kind of creature. So we have to sort of take that into consideration. They were doing this kind of thing about 6,000, even 7,000 years ago here in this part of France. So we really have to question, you know, was there a relationship between this area of France and ancient Turkey? There's incredibly large megaliths, there's 3D relief carvings, there are some hold stones here. We have some of the symbolism, which could be similar. Some of the animals carved on some of these stones are very similar to Göbekli Tepe and other sites in southeast Turkey. And it really does suggest that there was an extremely ancient megalithic culture in Europe, and this was part of it. So this is the top part of the stone here. Here, probably on this one, is where the carving was of the strange kind of creature with some kind of bag handle. And you can see this has been used. People have come here and taken the stone. And you can just see the magnitude of this. It's quite remarkable. Obviously, these gravel pits are where the stones were based. And then we have the greatest part just here. Absolutely mega. So this is the main standing stone here at the site. This is the Grand Menhir. It stood at the base of the great mound which we walked past. Just behind me here you can see evidence of where many other standing stones once stood in like a row. And this part of the row, one of the stones here was probably the one that was used in the Table Des Marchands, which you can see over there behind me, and also in Gavronis. This was about 68 feet tall. It would have been seen for miles around. It would have been like a good foresight for astronomy. Apparently from St Michael's tumulus, the Grand Tumulus in Karnak, from there when looking this direction at the Grand Menhir, you would have actually been used as a kind of sighting for the extreme moon rises at different times of the year over the 18.6 year moon cycle. There's also evidence there could be other astronomical alignments, something that Howard Crowhurst and other people have worked on. But this really was the biggest single standing stone on the planet, next only really to the obelisk, which are kind of standing stones, and the stones of Baalbek. It fell probably within a few hundred years or 1,000 years or so of it being constructed, around 4,500 BC, and it's clearly the oldest part of this site, much older than the other parts, because they actually used parts of this stone and other stones that were here, the oldest ones, in the later constructions like the chambers, Gavronis and other such places. And this has been noticed in other parts of Brittany as well. So this is just really, really quite an amazing and impressive place to be. So we're here with Jim Vieira at the Grand Menhir. So what do you make of this from a stonemason's perspective?
Well, it's about 4500 BC. The stone was brought over 10 kilometers and through water on land also. That's a real engineering conundrum. That's fascinating. You know, and this is like 4200 BC, the passage grave after the fact, reusing the stones. I don't know, it seems kind of bizarre. Like, would the builders of this reuse the stones in that? Possibly. It seems like maybe they're two different groups of builders, but yeah, it's just another astonishing thing we've seen in Brittany. It's megalithic wonderland, and it's about 350 tons, about 70 foot high, and brought from 10 kilometers away. Right? That's quite a feat. 7,000 years ago.
And it would have come from across water, even when the water levels were lower, it still would have come across water and across land. So they would have had to utilize boats to do this. And also the name of it, which I find quite amusing, is it was like the fairy stone.
Yeah.
And so what that means, we don't know, whether it had some kind of light phenomena associated with it. But the reuse of it's interesting because they may have seen these as having power, some kind of power within the stones. So they could have been placed specifically, different types of rock in specific locations. We know this is an earthquake fault zone, so the energies could have been harnessed through the stone and they imbued with power. And these stories could have then been the reason why they were reused for the roofs of chambers like Gavronis and the Table Des Marchands. So there's a lot going on here, probably more than you can see with the naked eye.
You got it. Virtually every site in the British Isles, in Brittany, it's associated with the giant or the little people. It's not just wishful thinking. I don't know really what it means, if it's a literal truth, but there's some truth in there. It's bizarre. It really is. Like these disorganized, bands of people building these things all have the same legends. It's like, and this this speaks for itself. This is like a blue whale and it's one of 4 pieces, it's outrageous,
And so there was a lot more going on here than we might realize. This is probably the spot where it stood. They probably marked that there. These were where the other stones would have stood, that then got removed and built into such sites as the Table Des Marchands over there. So this image just shows you 3 of the standing stones here, obviously the Grand Menhir on the left. And the carving on it, which you can see just there, must be on over there on one of these stones, which can no longer be traced. And the other 2 stones were also present on the site, and they show very interesting symbolism. On the left, we have actually what looks like some kind of bag, if you look carefully. It sort of looks like a whale as well. And you have animals there, and you have the shepherd's crook or some kind of axe. And this one's very intriguing. It has a kind of conical shape with almost like a gravestone window shape on it as well. So we're looking at all these different types of symbolism. And this one here, the Grand Menhir, again has some kind of bag handle, and it almost looks like some kind of fish. It's very bizarre. So we have this strange symbolism which we do find all along the Iberian Peninsula, and you can just see the size of what these stones must have been like way back in the 5th millennium BC. So it's just amazing to be here at the tallest known menhir, standing stone, pretty much in the world. The rain and the wind is pretty strong today, but you can see the crystalline nature. It's like an igneous type granite that came from 10 kilometers away. So just to get it here is an amazing feat in itself.
You went yesterday to see the Grand Menhir Brisé?
Yeah.
I've done a talk about this stone, which is not out in English. It's only in French, but I discovered something very interesting about this stone. It's its position. Its precise position, its latitude, is 47.571428 latitude, which is 333 divided by 7. Now, Avebury is 360 divided by 7. and this giant standing stone 333 divided by 7. Exactly, you know, to 1 meter precision. And that got me thinking, you know, what the hell is this? 333 divided by 7. I mean, you have all the number thing, you know, with the 3s and the 7s, the two sort of basic sacred numbers. But it goes further than that, because if you take the co-latitude is 90 degrees minus the latitude, right? And so that's the angle. Instead of being taken from the pole, it's taken from the equator. Mm-hmm. So if you take the co-latitude, the angle is 297 over 7. It's 333 over 7, and the co-latitude 297 over 7. And the difference between the two is 36 over 7. Now, what I realized is that at this particular latitude, that's linked to it's linked to the inclination of the moon's orbit with respect to the Earth's orbit. In fact, the Earth's orbit is the plane of the ecliptic, and the moon is inclined with respect to that at an angle of 36 over 7 degrees. 5.14, it's given by NASA as 5.145 degrees. I reckon it's 5.1428. It's 36 over 7. And so by putting that stone at that particular position, then you get specific geometry with its shadow when the moon is maximum or minimum. And it's all linked to 36 over 7, and it only happens that it can only be positioned at this particular latitude.
A lot of the math that you see at this time requires a much greater level of expertise than was purported to exist, you know.
Well, it's quite obvious. If these people knew the inclination of the moon's orbit to a very high precision, and not only that, it's linked to numbers, 36 over 7, right? They're very specific numbers. What this suggests is that these people actually knew the laws of the cosmos.